Hello guys and welcome to Smart Code. The topic we are going to cover in this tutorial is how to add CSS to HTML document. And in just a few minutes you will find out adding CSS to HTML document is very easy. Okay, so let's check it out. CSS can only be added to HTML document in three ways, and we call them inline style, internal style, and external style. And we're gonna take a closer look to all these three methods one by one. But first, we need to write some HTML for applying the CSS. Let's take a heading element and a paragraph element. Okay, let's now talk about inline CSS style. When we write inline CSS, we put CSS directly inside the HTML element using the style attribute. Let's see how. I want to put some style to my HTML, so I will first insert style attribute, and then I will write a CSS rule inside the double quotes. And the CSS rule ends with a semicolon. We are setting the text color to red using color property. Let's apply the same property to the paragraph tag. Now, if you render your page in the browser, you will see CSS is applied, right? You can even write multiple CSS rules in a single style attribute. In this case, you have to separate every rule by a semicolon. Let's say I want a horizontal line in the document, so I can insert CSS border property right after the semicolon. Just reload your page and you will see the result. Now you know how to write inline CSS, but practically we don't write inline CSS because writing CSS together with the web content is considered as bad practice. Inline CSS makes the code hard to read and maintain, and my suggestion is you don't use inline CSS in your projects, right? Let's go ahead and talk about internal CSS. We place internal CSS in the head section of HTML document inside the style element. Now inside the style element, we write CSS selectors. CSS selectors are used to target the HTML elements that we want to style. Let's write a selector for heading element and for paragraph element. A selector has always a body that we mark using curly braces, and inside the curly braces, you can write a bunch of different CSS rules. Let's now apply the same CSS rule using internal CSS. Now we don't need inline CSS as we have internal CSS, so you can just remove the style attribute from the HTML tags. We see no difference in the output, and that means CSS is applied well to the HTML elements. Now you have got idea how to write internal CSS. But the question is, when do we use internal CSS? And the answer is, if you have one page website, then you can use internal CSS. But if you have more than one page, then you won't use internal CSS. You will rather use external CSS. So let's now move on and see how we write external CSS and what are the advantages of writing external CSS. External CSS means you have your CSS in a separate file, and that file is linked to your HTML document. Let's now create a CSS file, and don't forget to give it .css extension. Now in this external CSS file, you can write CSS selectors directly without writing the style tag. This file has CSS extension and your browser knows everything in the file is CSS code. So just copy the selectors that we wrote earlier and paste them in the file. Now external CSS file is ready, but it is not connected to the HTML document. And in order to connect this file to the HTML document, we use link element inside the head section of HTML document. So let's do that and link the file to the document. In the head section, you will write link tag. Now this link tag has two important attributes. The first one is rel. The rel attribute describes the relationship between the documents, and the value to rel should always be style sheet. The second attribute is href, and here we are going to specify the location of our CSS file. As our CSS file is in the same folder, so we don't need to specify any folder. Just write the name of your CSS file, and that's it. Your external CSS file is now included to the HTML document. So save the files and check the result in the browser. And there you see no difference. That means your external CSS file is working fine. Now external CSS file is very useful and it benefits you. The important thing is that you have your CSS code in a separate file, and it would be easy for you to find, change, and update CSS rules. And an external CSS file can be added to many pages. That means you can give same style to many pages using a single external file. I hope you understand now how we add CSS to HTML. I will see you in the next tutorial, and thanks for watching Smart Code.